Welcome to QuickSpeak, the English podcast that helps you learn English naturally and effectively. Today we're going to talk about the hidden dangers of social media.
Yeah, it's true. Social media has really become a part of our everyday lives, hasn't it? And, it connects us in ways we couldn't have imagined before. But there are some downsides, some things we need to be careful of.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit. We all know social media can be great for staying in touch with friends and family, right? Or for getting news updates. But what are some of the maybe less obvious ways it can affect us?
Well, one of the big ones is this idea of social comparison. When you're always scrolling through, these perfect pictures and stories, it's easy to start feeling like you're not good enough.
Right.
Or to get jealous. And that can be really damaging too, especially younger people who are still figuring out who they are.
Right, that makes sense. It's like
Yeah.
everyone's putting on their best face online, and it creates this fake reality that's hard to compete with.
Exactly. Yeah. And that pressure to look perfect can lead to a lot of anxiety, like the fear of missing out. You're constantly checking your phone, worried that you're not having as much fun as everyone else. And it can be exhausting. It takes away from enjoying the things that are actually happening around you.
So it's not just about feeling bad because other people seem to be doing better, but it also pulls us out of the moment, right? Distracts us from real life.
That's it, exactly. And this kind of goes hand in hand with another danger, which is how addictive social media can be. These platforms, they're designed to keep you hooked. They use algorithms that feed you exactly the stuff you're most likely to click on, and it can create this cycle of just endless scrolling, where you lose track of time completely and you can't stop.
Oh, I've definitely been there. That just one more scroll feeling,
Yeah.
and then suddenly an hour is gone. Like my brain just craves that constant stimulation, even if it's not really doing anything good for me.
Right. And that's because, they're playing with your brain chemistry. Every notification, every comment, it triggers a release of dopamine, that feel-good chemical. And so it creates this feedback loop where you're always chasing that next hit of dopamine. And it can lead to, a real dependence on your phone.
It's kind of scary when you think about it like that, isn't it? They're messing with our brains. And it makes me wonder about, the long-term effects, all this screen time, all this information overload. Could it be affecting our attention spans, our ability to focus?
I think that's a really valid concern. I mean, there's more and more research showing that too much social media can actually make it harder to think, to remember things, to concentrate. It's like that constant stream of notifications and little bits of information. It makes it really hard to think deeply about anything or to focus on something for a long time.
And we haven't even talked about cyberbullying yet, which I know can be a huge problem, especially for young people.
Yeah, that's right. The internet can be a kind of shield for bullies. They feel anonymous. They can say things they wouldn't say to someone's face. And the things they do say, name calling, spreading rumors, even threats, that can have a really, really devastating impact on the victim.
It's especially worrying because online harassment can feel like there's no escape. It's everywhere. Even in your own home. It's not like traditional bullying where there's at least some safe spaces.
You're absolutely right. And then you have the fact that, what's online stays online. It can be really hard to get rid of something once it's out there. And that can, haunt people for years, even if they've moved on from the situation.
It makes you think about the whole issue of privacy on social media, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We're always sharing information about ourselves, our likes and dislikes, where we are, even our deepest thoughts and feelings. What are the potential dangers there?
That's a great question, and it's a big one. Social media companies, they collect a huge amount of data about everything we do online. And sure, some of that's used to personalize our experience, but it can also be used for things like targeted advertising. That feeling like you're being watched and analyzed all the time.
It's almost as if they're building a profile of us, right?
Yeah.
Based on all that data, figuring out who we are, what we want, how to influence us. It's a bit creepy when you think about it.
It definitely raises some big questions about who owns that data and who controls it. A lot of platforms, they do let you change your privacy settings, but they can be really complicated, Most people don't really understand what they're agreeing to.
So it's like we're giving away all this personal information without really knowing what the consequences might be or how it could be used against us in the future.
That's one way to look at it. And then there's the risk of data breaches. If a company's security isn't good enough, all that information about you, it could get out there. And that puts you at risk for identity theft or all sorts of other problems.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different things here. Social comparison, addiction, cyberbullying, privacy concerns. It's clear that social media, even though it has its good points, it also has some real risks.
Yeah, I think it's important to be cautious, to be a little bit skeptical about it all, to understand the potential downsides. It can help us use it more safely, more thoughtfully.
This has really given me a lot to think about in terms of how I use social media myself. But before we go too deep into that, let's take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment to talk about some specific examples of how these issues play out in real life.
One thing we haven't really talked about yet is how social media can really change how we see news and information. It's become like a breeding ground for misinformation and fake news, things that just spread so quickly.
Yeah, no, that's true. I've definitely
Oh,
seen stuff shared online that turned out to be completely made up.
right.
It's easy to fall for it, especially if if it looks like it comes from someone you trust.
That's the thing. You see, these platforms, they're more interested in keeping people engaged than they are in accuracy. Like their algorithms, they're designed to show you the things that'll make you keep scrolling, even if it's not true.
So it's not enough to just be careful about what you share yourself.
Yeah.
You've got to be really careful about
Yeah.
who you're reading to, even if it comes from, friends and family.
Exactly. You really have to develop that sense of skepticism, especially with those attention-grabbing headlines, or stories that just seem too good to be true or too bad to be true.
It's almost like we have to become like fact checkers, in this digital world.
In a way, yeah. We have to double-check information, make sure it's coming from a reliable source, and be wary of anything that feels like it's playing on our emotions or our biases.
Speaking of biases, that makes me think of the whole echo chamber thing,
Yeah.
Well, social media often shows us things that just agree with what we already believe. It's like it reinforces those beliefs, even if they're not really accurate.
That's right. Those filter bubbles, they can create this distorted view of the world. You only see what confirms your existing opinions, and then it becomes really hard to have a real conversation with anyone who thinks differently.
It's like everyone's just retreating into their own little corner,
Yeah.
and it divides people instead of bringing them together.
And all that anonymity you get online, it just makes it worse. People feel like they can say anything, things they'd never say to someone's face, and that leads to more aggression, more hostility.
It's like social media brings out the worst in people sometimes.
Yeah.
And it gets in the way of really connecting,
Yeah.
on a human level.
There's definitely that risk, all that pressure to look perfect, to keep up with everyone else, that fear of missing out, the constant scrolling. It takes a toll. It really does.
Yeah. So what can we do about it?
Yeah.
I mean, we can't just give up social media completely, right? It's too much a part of our lives now.
I agree. It's all about finding that balance. I think the first step is to become more aware of our habits. Why are we using it? What are we actually getting out of it?
It's about being intentional, right?
Yeah.
Like choosing to connect with the people and things that actually make our lives better instead of just, scrolling mindlessly to fill the time.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
setting some limits can help too. Maybe have certain times of day where you don't touch your phone. Give your mind a break from all that stimulation.
And maybe we should all try to be a bit more present,
Yeah.
in our real lives. Spend time doing things we enjoy. Spend time with people we care about. Those are the things that really make us feel good in a way that social media can't.
I think it's also really important to remember that what you see on social media, it's not the whole picture. It's just a carefully selected version of people's lives. It's not a fair comparison to our own lives, with all their messiness and imperfections.
It's so easy to forget that, though, isn't it? When you're constantly seeing these pictures of perfect vacations and relationships and achievements, it's hard to remember that it's not all real.
Right. It's all about perspective. Reminding yourself that behind those filtered photos and those witty captions, there's a real person, someone with their own problems and insecurities, just like everyone else.
This has been really eye-opening, I have to say. It's made me realize I've kind of been taking social media for granted, both the good and the bad.
I think it's good for all of us to step back every now and then and really think about our relationship with these platforms. Are they serving us or are we serving them?
That's a really good question. But before we leave everyone to ponder that, there's one more aspect of social media I'd like to look at. And that's how it affects the way we communicate.
That's an interesting point. It lets us stay in touch with people all over the world, sure, but it also changes how we talk to each other, and not always for the better.
I've noticed that sometimes after spending like hours online, I find it hard to have like real conversations,
Yeah.
deep, meaningful conversations. It's like my brain has gotten used to these short, superficial interactions.
I think a lot of people feel that way. Social media, it's so fast-paced, right? You've got those character limits, all that focus on visuals. It's hard to express complicated ideas or real emotions in a way that feels nuanced.
And the constant distractions, the notifications and the likes and the comments, it makes it hard to really pay attention to what someone's saying, both online and in person.
You're right. It's like our attention spans are being chopped up into little pieces. It makes it harder to stay focused on a conversation, to really think about what's being said.
And then there's the whole thing about nonverbal cues.
Mm.
Online, you don't see facial expressions, you don't see body language, you can't hear someone's tone of voice,
Yeah.
and that can lead to a lot of misunderstandings.
Yeah, that's true. Like sarcasm, for example, it's really hard to get that across in a text message, and it can lead to hurt feelings or even arguments.
So even though social media can make it easier to communicate in some ways, it can also make it harder to really connect, to build those deep, meaningful relationships.
It is a bit of a paradox, isn't it? We have all these ways to reach out to each other, but real human connection, it seems to be getting harder and harder to find.
It's kind of strange, isn't it, how social media, something that's supposed to bring us together, can sometimes make us feel more alone.
Yeah, you're right. It's kind of a weird contradiction. More ways to connect than ever, but more people feeling lonely.
I think it's partly because of that pressure to present this perfect image online. We only share the good stuff, the highlights, the happy moments, the successes.
Like everyone else is living this perfect life, and that can make your own problems feel so much worse. Like you're the only one who's struggling, the only one who's not always happy and successful.
And then you don't want to share your real feelings online. What if people judge you? What if they don't like it? So you end up feeling even more disconnected, even though you might have all these likes and followers.
It's a tough cycle to break out of. The more you look for validation online, the harder it is to find real connection.
So what can we do about it? How can we use social media in a way that actually helps us connect and maybe even feel less lonely?
I think it starts with being more aware of what we're actually looking at, what we're taking in, instead of just passively scrolling through all those perfect pictures. Try to find things that are real, that you can relate to, that inspire you.
And maybe we can all try to be a bit more open, more honest about our struggles.
Yeah.
Sharing those things, the imperfections, the doubts, it can actually help us connect with each other on a deeper level.
Exactly. It's about shifting the focus from trying to impress people to just trying to relate to them, to connect as human beings, all going through the same stuff.
And I think it's important to remember that social media, it's just a tool. It's not a replacement for real life, for real connections.
Yeah.
We need to make sure we're spending time with people face to face, doing things that bring us joy, connecting with people who care about us.
Absolutely. We can't let our online lives take over. There's no substitute for a hug, for laughing with friends, for just being present with someone you love.
This has been a really great conversation. It's made me think about social media in a whole new way. It's important to be careful, to set boundaries, to make sure we're using it in a way that benefits us, not the other way around.
It's all about taking control, making sure social media enriches our lives, not takes away from them.
And for those of you listening who are learning English, we hope you found this episode helpful and interesting.
Don't forget to check out our website for vocabulary lists and exercises related to today's topic.
And be sure to subscribe to QuickSpeak for more episodes like this one. Thanks for listening.